Hey there, and welcome. Today, we are building a completely new kind of toolkit, one for the modern teacher. We're going to move way past those old, rigid methods and really explore the core principles that make a classroom feel alive and, well, effective. So let's jump in and unpack what it really means to teach today. And this powerful analogy, it's really going to be our central theme. It just perfectly captures the danger of having only one tool, one strategy, one way of teaching, and trying to make it fit every single student in every single situation. It just doesn't work.
So let's get real for a second. Take a moment and think about your go-to classroom strategies. Do you ever find yourself falling back on that one single method for every lesson, every student, every little problem that pops up? Is your approach a hammer?
Now, the goal here isn't to throw away the hammer completely. Sometimes you need a hammer, but it's about adding more tools to the box. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to bust some common teaching myths and fill our toolkit with way more flexible, powerful, and effective strategies. All right, first up is a classic, and honestly a pretty destructive myth. This idea that to be respected, a teacher has to be feared. I mean, this belief has shaped classrooms for generations, but it is seriously time for an upgrade. And wow, this quote from a student teacher, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Mia's reflection shows you just how deep this idea runs. This assumption that control has to come from being loud, being tough, maybe even being a little scary.
Okay, look at this contrast. It's fascinating. The old dictator approach, sure, it might make students look like they're listening, but underneath, it often makes them resent or even hate the subject. The new approach, building rapport, it completely changes the game. The teacher becomes a guide, creating a safe space where students actually engage because they want to.
So let's be clear. Rapport isn't just about being nice. It's a strategic tool. It actually lowers student anxiety, which is absolutely critical for learning anything. It encourages them to speak up, and it makes sure that students aren't just counting the minutes until the bell rings. As one educator put it, you want students who are glad to see you come, not just glad to see you go.
Okay, so we've tackled fear. Now let's move on to our next big myth. This one is huge, especially for language teachers, but it applies everywhere. This belief that every single error a student makes is a failure that has to be stomped out immediately.
Just think about it for a second. A student is in the middle of speaking. They're trying to form an idea, and they make a mistake. What's your gut reaction? Is it to jump in and correct them right then and there? Well, the answer, it's not so simple. This old quote really says it all. Errors are not a disease, they're a symptom of learning. They're proof that a student is trying, that they're stretching beyond what's comfortable. So a classroom that punishes errors is really a classroom that punishes effort.
This is where we add a really important tool to our kit, context. As you can see, your response to an error depends entirely on the goal of the activity. If the goal is accuracy, like a grammar drill, then yeah, you might correct errors immediately to focus on the proper form. But if the goal is fluency, just getting them to talk, you might actually ignore that error for a moment to prioritize communication and keep the conversation flowing.
And the payoff for this flexible approach, it's huge. When students know it's okay to make mistakes, they take more risks, they feel less intimidated, right? It sends a powerful signal that the classroom is a safe space to practice, not a stage for perfection. It shows them that learning anything new is about bravely stepping into the unknown. So, you can probably see where this is going. These two myths we've just busted about fear and errors, they're not isolated ideas. They're part of a much, much bigger shift in education. It's the move from being the sage on the stage to becoming the guide on the side. Let's break this down. In the old teacher-centered model, you've got the teacher doing almost all the talking, just pouring knowledge into students who are sitting there passively. But in the student-centered model, the whole game changes. The teacher builds a structure where the students are the active ones. They're talking, they're discovering, they're working together. The teacher is facilitating learning, not just delivering a lecture.
So what does this actually look like in a real classroom? Well, it looks like students working together in pairs and groups, not just sitting in silent rows. It looks like them taking the lead on projects, finding information for themselves, instead of just being handed a worksheet. It's a classroom where the teacher knows when to step back so the students can step up.
All right, this brings us to the final and maybe the most important piece of our modern toolkit. If the teacher isn't just the sage on the stage anymore, then what are they? And the answer is, there are a lot of things. The modern teacher's role is all about wearing many, many hats.
And here's the kicker. These aren't roles you just pick and choose from. An effective teacher is playing all of these roles, often within a single class period. You're the organizer, setting up the activity, then you're the prompter, encouraging a quiet student, then you're the observer, watching how the groups work, you become a resource when they get stuck, and finally, you're the assessor, giving feedback. It's a constant, fluid dance. I just love this quote from another student teacher, Rehab. It's such a beautifully simple way to summarize this entire shift in thinking. Your job isn't just to provide the answers, but to guide students as they learn to find them and make sense of them for themselves. And just like that, we've come full circle, right back to our hammer and our toolkit. Effective teaching was never about finding that one perfect method. It's about knowing when to use a wrench, when to grab a screwdriver, and yeah, when the hammer is actually the right tool for the job. Versatility is everything. So, that brings us to the end. We've moved beyond that single hammer and started filling our toolkit with some really powerful new approaches. Building rapport, reframing how we see errors, shifting to a student-centered classroom, and embracing the many hats a teacher wears. The real work, of course, starts now. So the only question left is, which tool will you pick up first? Thanks for joining me.